From haunted and historic hotels said to host the restless spirits of guests long departed, to some of the most famous comedy clubs on Earth rumored to be paranormally stained by their dark pasts. For a place often referred to as the City of Angels, Tinseltown sure boasts its fair share of ghosts, demons, and the otherworldly. Which is why the Speakeasy is chilled to bring you our list of picks for the most haunted places in the one and only Los Angeles. Let's dive right in. Number 5. The Hollywood Pacific Theater. The Hollywood Pacific Theater is a famous and historic movie theater located off of the ever-extravagant Hollywood Boulevard itself, gracing none other than the awe-inspiring Hollywood Walk of Fame. The theater was initially opened in 1928 by brothers Harry, Albert, Sam, and Jack Warner. Before you even ask, yes, those Warner Brothers. This is Hollywood, remember? Originally, it was named Warner Hollywood Theater, or just the Warner Brothers Theater to those in the know. The KFWB radio broadcasting towers were set atop the building, with the famous radio station taking up residence at the theater itself years later. From the 1950s and onward, as widescreen productions became all the rage, the theater underwent a massive renovation and modernization project. It was reopened in 1953 as Warner Cinemas. In 1968, Stanley Warner sold the property to Pacific Theaters, who renamed it under the title we all know and love today, the Hollywood Pacific Theater. In 1978, the theater underwent further renovations, gaining 2 new screens in the process. The Hollywood Pacific Theater closed as a full-time cinema in 1994. Sadly, a large portion of the theater's basement was affected by water damage as a result of the construction of the Hollywood Subway Red Line in 1993, as well as the Northridge earthquake a year later in 1994. Today, the theater is closed to the public with the exception of the occasional tour group, studies, and workmen. Several interested parties have hopes of one day restoring and reopening the prestigious old building, but as it currently stands, many claim it's too much work to be worth saving. Local legend tells the theater may be holding more than just dust and relics of the past, and over the years a number of stories have emerged depicting encounters with some very famous apparitions. As the story goes, the Warner Brothers poured their very hearts and souls into their business, Sam literally working himself to death in 1927, just months before the theater was opened and just a day before the premiere of their big film. It's said his soul was left restless, stuck working even in death. His full-bodied apparition has been sighted all across the premises, as well as by passers-by who often spy him gazing from various windows, sometimes faintly glowing. At least 2 custodial staff members have been recorded as resigning from their positions at the theater due to Ol' Sammy, who would, according to their accounts, cross the lobby every night, enter the elevator to the second-floor offices, and stare them down until the doors closed. Many have reported sighting Sam pacing the lobby or the upstairs corridor, and it's suspected that several early theater goers simply mistook him for one of the living. It's believed that Sam may not be alone in the old building, and a number of additional occurrences not textbook with his normally fairly passive entity have been reported, including furniture dragged across the floor by an invisible force, strange scratching noises coming from empty rooms, the disembodied sounds of voices from the past, and lights flickering with no known cause. The most haunted area of the Hollywood Pacific is said to be the basement and storage areas, where many have reported heavy objects being pushed off shelves dangerously close to members of the living, the sensation of invisible hands grasping one's shoulder, and strange sounds, breathing, that cause many to feel that someone unseen is standing right behind them. Lastly, and confined to no particular area, tour groups, workmen, and theater goers of the past have reported batteries on personal electronics dying suddenly, heavy disembodied footsteps, sometimes in crowds, and doors opening and sometimes slamming shut violently all by themselves. Number 4. The Pico House. The Pico House is a historic hotel turned museum located on Old Plaza that boasts the reputation of being the first three-story building in the city, as well as, fun factoid here, the first to have both men's and women's restrooms on each floor. It was originally constructed between 1869 and 1870 under the order of Don Pio Pico, the last Mexican governor of Alta California. It opened under the name Casa de Pico and was widely considered the most elegant hotel in all of Southern California. In 1871, racial tensions broke when between 18 and 23 Chinese men and boys were slaughtered just outside the hotel. This tragic event cast a lingering shadow over the neighborhood and caused many to seek residence elsewhere. In 1880, Pio ran into financial troubles he couldn't shake. Eventually, he was forced to relinquish the hotel to the San Francisco Savings and Loan Company. The property underwent a name change, after which from 1892 to 1920 it was known as the National Hotel. In 1953, the state of California took control of the property. By 1960, the hotel's front had been fully restored to reflect its original appearance. Today, this prestigious old palace belongs to El Pueblo de Los Angeles State Historic Monument and is open to the public for viewing and tours. The ground floor is often utilized to hold a range of exhibits, shows, and events. Over its long existence, a number of eyewitness reports and stories of encounters with the unknown have led many to consider the Pico House as one of the more haunted locations across the city of Los Angeles. Some claim the property is haunted by the restless and possibly even vengeful spirits of the Chinese massacre victims, while others swear it's the soul of Don Pio himself, returning to the beloved property he was forced to leave in life. Many entering the Pico House report chilling occurrences, banging sounds heard through the walls, doors opening and slamming on their own, and unnatural cold spots. Several apparitions not matching the description of Pio or those of the massacre victims have been sighted roaming the halls, donning attire from various periods, and many report watching in shock as eerie shadow-like figures peer from windows or peek over balconies, only to vanish moments later. Also reported across the property are objects moving spatially on their own, light switches flicking from on to off by themselves, and a general feeling of unease experienced by most stepping foot on the premises. Some accounts tell the hotel's supernatural happenings get much worse after dark, and those who've been in the building late, guests, staff, workmen, contractors, have reported a wide range of encounters with the inexplicable, including strange puffs of smoke floating around with seeming cognition, tools or work items going missing only to be found in odd places later, and sinks, toilets, or kitchen appliances activating when no one is near them or behaving as if they have a mind of their own. Lastly, one of the most commonly experienced happenings at the Pico House is the hearing of disembodied voices, usually by those who are alone. These reports detail conversations heard from just around corners, the sounds of lavish parties somewhere out of sight, and even individuals hearing their own name being called or whispered in a chilling, coaxing manner, as if someone or something is trying to lure them down certain halls or into certain rooms. Number 3. The Hollywood Wax Museum. The Hollywood Wax Museum is a world-famous wax museum located just off of Hollywood Boulevard that features a number of celebrity replicas and boasts the rather impressive reputation of being the longest-running wax museum in the United States. The building now used to house the Hollywood Wax Museum first opened its doors as the Embassy Club in the ripe old year of 1929. It grew rapidly in popularity, achieving its height through the mid-1930s. In 1965, one Spoonie Singh purchased the property in whole. He remodeled and repurposed the aging building into a wax museum he intended to dedicate to notable celebrities. Spoonie ran the business for a quarter of a century, 25 profitable years, opening a number of additional business ventures on the side. He finally met retirement in 1990, stepping down and leaving his business affairs to be attended by his family. And attend they did. From 1996 to the date of this upload, the Hollywood Wax Museum has opened 3 other locations across the country, in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, Branson, Missouri, and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. In 2012, the Singh family was recognized as Heroes of Hollywood in honor of their past and continued support of the community. The Singh family continues to operate the museum to this day, their collection expanding steadily with each passing year. Some of their creations are so lifelike, and yet not. It's easy to see why the masses tend to get a little creeped out when walking through rows of glossed over eyes. But if local legend holds any merit, the museum's creep factor isn't based solely off of these slightly chilling wax creations. Staff, visitors, and work crews to the Hollywood Wax Museum over the years have reported an alarming range of inexplicable activity that many claim goes far beyond one's mind playing tricks. Activity including shadowy figures and mists caught roaming between displays, orbs, half-formed entities, and strange images caught in photographs and videos, and the feeling of being closely watched by someone or something unseen. On a number of occasions, museum goers have reported watching in both shock and horror as wax figures begin to move on their own. Many claim this is just a trick of the light, but this claim doesn't explain away the instances in which staff have arrived early to open and have discovered figures moved great distances from their displays, as if they took a walk in the middle of the night. Several local legends claim the wax figures moving can be explained by the deaths of their living celebrity counterparts, namely those who died near Hollywood Boulevard or whom had a close connection with the museum and life. Disturbingly, it's thought their confused souls might have mistaken the near-perfect wax replicas for their former bodies and accidentally taken up residence within the museum. Chilling. Also reported across the property are objects moving on their own, lights flickering or going out entirely, and an overwhelming feeling of panic. One infamous local tale tells of a reporter thinking it would make a good article, deciding to lock himself inside to determine whether the museum was really haunted or not. As the story goes, when staff arrived in the morning, they found him pale, huddled near the front door, unable to speak. It's said that as soon as he noticed the door was open, he sprinted through it in terror and was never seen at his job or at the museum again. Also reported all throughout the Hollywood Wax Museum are doors opening and closing on their own, strange knocking sounds, disembodied voices, and the feeling of being closely followed, even tapped by an unseen finger. Lastly, and rather strangely in the realm of paranormal, many report not only experiencing random icy cold spots, but also areas that feel unnaturally hot, as if standing right next to a fire. Number 2, the Comedy Store. The Comedy Store is a world-famous comedy club located in West Hollywood off of Sunset Strip that's renowned for the number of exceedingly famous celebrities it's given start to, as well as accommodated over the years. Some of the club's major players include the likes of Tim Allen, Dave Chappelle, Joe Rogan, Louis C.K., Jim Carrey, and the list goes on and on. The building the Comedy Store now sits in was first opened in 1935 as Seville, a nightclub that was doomed to flop and close before the year's end. In 1940, the property was purchased by Billy Wilkerson. Wilkerson redesigned it in its entirety, reopening it as Ciro's, a club opened only to celebrities. Through its lifetime, Ciro's hosted the likes of Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, Lucille Ball, Joan Crawford, Ronald Reagan, and many more. In 1942, Wilkerson passed the club to none other than Herman Hoover, who continued to manage the club until it closed down in 1957. Hoover filed for bankruptcy 2 years later in 1959, resulting in Ciro's being sold at public auction. The property changed owners and names several times over the following years, until finally in 1972 it was acquired by Mitzi Shore, who opened it as the Comedy Store. In 1979, comedians formed a temporary labor union demanding payment for their appearances at the club. They protested and picketed on the front end. Notable among the picket lines were names such as David Letterman and Jay Leno. A number of comedians were cut immediately, banned from ever performing at the club again. In the ensuing scuffle, tragically, Steve Lubetkin jumped to his death from the Hyatt right next to the club. His body landed directly in front of the Comedy Store. It's said in in hopes his death would bring an end to the labor dispute. Through the 1980s and 1990s, a number of today's biggest names were born at the store, including Howie Mandel, Robin Williams, Paul Mooney, and Michael Keaton. Mitzi Shore ran the club until her recent passing in 2018. May she rest in peace. Mitzi's family has since taken over management of her affairs, and the Comedy Store remains open to this day, still hosting the biggest of the big while also giving new and promising talent a chance to break into the industry. Over its existence, staff members, actors, comedians, and clubgoers have reported a range of spooky activity within the Comedy Store that isn't always funny, and a number of ghost stories claim the club's sometimes tumultuous past may have left more than a few restless spirits. As local legend has it, no fewer than 5 separate spirits haunt the old property. Activity is said to get strongest at night and during periods in which the club is closed down or undergoing work. Some legends tell that Ciro's was controlled by the mafia and that the basement was used to torture and kill any who posed a threat. Many claim the property is haunted by the restless spirits of said victims, and those who enter the basement often report being overcome by a feeling they can only describe as death. Disturbingly, some have claimed to sight the spirit of Steve Lubetkin replaying his final moments. This death replay has been so real at times that several have been prompted to call the authorities, who always arrive to find the area completely clear. In one unnerving instance, just moments after staff had finished setting out chairs for the day, they returned to find all 40 chairs stacked on the stage, a feat impossible for all but an extremely skilled and prepared crew. Also reported commonly across the premises are objects moving on their own, furniture found rearranged, and candles extinguishing, then relighting themselves. A range of full-bodied apparitions donning clothing from different decades have been sighted roaming the property silently. Many report sitting at tables, watching crowds through the windows, or even walking straight through walls that wouldn't have been there years prior, as if completely unaware of the passage of time and their own demises. Throughout history, one area of the club has been dubbed the Belly Room. In truth, no one is certain where the name came from, but some darker theories include everything from abortions to grisly torture. From this room, many report the sounds of women screaming, babies crying, heavy footsteps, and banging when it's completely empty. Lastly, and possibly most chillingly, several have reported a large, black, smoke-like figure known to frequent the front door. This spirit has been known to appear suddenly, to grab, push, or block those trying to enter the club, especially those entering in poor taste or with negative intent. This ghost's behavior has led many to speculate this may be the spirit of one of the club's multiple former bouncers, true to his duty even in death. Number 1. Griffith Park. Griffith Park, located right off I-5 and bordering a number of neighborhoods in northern LA, covers a whopping 4,310 acres and claims the title of being the second largest city park in the entirety of California, as well as one of the largest parks in North America. The land the park sits on was originally owned by the Felice family, who resided there over several generations. In 1863, ownership of the land changed hands. It was passed between multiple families before finally landing in the hands of Griffith J. Griffith in 1882. In 1889, Griffith donated 3,015 acres of his sprawling estate to the city, who, in turn, designated it to be used as a park. In 1903, Griffith attempted to kill his wife by way of shooting, but was unsuccessful. He was subsequently arrested and spent a few years in jail before returning. Griffith wasn't greeted with the homecoming party he probably expected, however, as old friends refused to take personal visits and the community shied away whenever he reached out. He was shunned for the rest of his days. Several attractions were added to the park over the years, including the old zoo, which opened its gates in 1912. Sadly, the zoo became infamous for its poor treatment of animals, and due to overcrowding and underfunding, it eventually closed down in 1966. All remaining animals were transferred to the much better conditions of the brand new Los Angeles Zoo. Eventually, the city launched a reclamation. Bars were removed from old exhibits, picnic tables and benches were added, and eventually land that once acted as a zoo was absorbed and merged with the rest of the park. Today, that portion, and the entirety of the park for that matter, remain open to the public, offering an astounding range of trails, activities, and attractions. Over its ridiculously long existence, a chilling range of stories have emerged from the park, some solidifying themselves as local legends passed down through generations. These stories have led to Griffith Park being considered not only one of the most extravagant and expensive parks in North America, but also one of its most haunted. As legend has it, the park was hit with a bad dose of magic called the Curse of the Felices. In 1863, Don Antonio Felice passed away on his beloved property. It's said that shortly afterwards his family was cheated out of their land and inheritance by either employing the help of black magic practitioners or, in some versions, in their anger itself, they cursed the land and any outside of their family that may attempt to lay claim on it for all eternity. Interestingly enough, over the following years, each new owner faced some form of brutal tragedy, something that caused their lives to fall apart, deaths in the family, bankruptcy, extreme illness. As the legend furthers, each time things were at their very worst, Antonio's spirit would materialize, a grim look on his face. Even more chilling are the number of murders, suicides, or random freak accidents that have taken place throughout the park, up to recent times. In 1933, 29 people were killed when a blaze from a wildfire jumped to the park. In 1976, a young couple making out atop a picnic table were crushed to death when a tree literally fell on them. Many report citing the ghost of Don Antonio Felice himself, mostly after dark, riding a spectral horse down the main trail or standing on high vantage points. The spirit of Don Antonio's niece, Donna Petronia, has also been sighted often, wandering the grounds in a white dress, occasionally atop a white horse, around midnight. Unlike Don Antonio, many report his niece seems calm, passive, with many claiming to become so enamored by the beauty of the whole sight, they get completely lost in the moment, forgetting to try for a photograph. Reported all across Griffith Park are shadow figures that lurk just off the trails, extreme cold spots even in the dead of summer, the feeling of being closely watched or followed, and disturbing cries from the old animal exhibits. A ghostly little girl has been sighted all across the property. She's been known to approach visitors seeking help. In recent times, several have speculated she may be the spirit of one of the many children tragically abandoned in the park, possibly one that died of exposure. Some tales tell that not only apparitions walk in the park, but that a number of satanic cults and black magic practices have opened portals directly to hell, and that something darker roams free. On a number of occasions, park-goers have discovered what appear to be ritual sites, occult symbols carved or drawn into trees and stone, and even animal sacrifices. A number of the park's alleged suicide and murder victims have never been found. This opens a very real door to the possibility that human sacrifice may account for several of these lost victims. Possibly resulting from these occult practices, a number of park-goers report encountering something that can only be described as demonic, a towering, shadowy beast with red eyes that stalks those who enter after dark. This being is known to stay hidden and then suddenly spring up, startling any nearby while hissing, "Get out!" Some have also reported having rocks thrown at them by this strange thing, and a handful have even described frightening physical attacks, in which they were pinned down by this demon, certain they were about to meet their ends, before watching it dissolve into the night, leaving them on the ground, alone. Near the merry-go-round, a mysterious ghostly figure has been sighted descending the adjacent staircase, only to disappear at the very last step. And the spirit of Peg Entwistle, an actress who took her own life following a bad review in 1932, has been encountered often near the Hollywood sign, waving, smiling to better times briefly before fading away. Well, that about sums it up. Oh wait, you didn't think we'd leave it on a light note, did you? Lastly, a bizarre humanoid creature with reversed, jointed legs has been spied crab walking through the park at night, sticking to the shadows, always just out of the light. It has been encountered on no less than 3 occasions and is said to have green skin, pitch black eyes, and, according to some, white pants and black shoes or oddly shaped feet. Not much is known about this disturbing perversion, but all who have encountered it describe feeling instant fear. Some recount being chased at a dead sprint by it, back to their vehicles and taking off, then returning the next day to find hand and footprints mere meters behind theirs in the dirt, as if it was trying to catch them. With this land's awesome history, its horrifying range of hauntings, cryptid sightings, and reports of possible demonic encounters, it was downright simple choosing Griffith Park as our pick for the most haunted place in Los Angeles. Thank you all for tuning in to our list of picks for the most haunted places in Los Angeles. If you enjoyed listening to our stories as much as we enjoyed telling them, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn notifications on so you know when fresh content is coming out. Throw us a like if you feel we deserve it, and most importantly, share this video and our channel with anyone you think could use a good scare. We'll see you all next time.